What's going on, folks? I'm Automatic. Today we're going to talk about a subject that's been around since I can remember, but nowadays it's essential to really play Street Fighter V. Well, you need to, because you can't always rely on your reactions. You may have great situational awareness, and you might understand how your opponent, how they feel, what they want to do, but sometimes it's just not enough. And these days, I feel strongly that you have to understand the numbers and all of the situations and how all the moving parts affect each other in order to understand why it is you might be not ready for the entire situation. You see, even Daigo sometimes, somebody jumps at him, he's just kind of like, whoa, what's going on? I guess I have to block now, which kind of brings me to one of the points, is that blocking sometimes is an anti-air in Street Fighter V. But the first thing I do want to talk about is one of the more obvious points about anti-airing is you want a fast attack or an invincible attack. So one of the reasons why I'm using Karin here is because she kind of struggles with the anti-air situation. So you have anti-airs such as standing jab a little bit, which I believe is 3 frames, so it's there, but the hitbox is kind of whack. You have jumping medium punch. You have crouching hard punch, which also the hitbox of it is kind of you have to be really specific in how it hits. And then you have EX for Senha, which is almost a cure-all because it's invincible in 5 frames of startup. So if you're unsure if you can anti-air with something like this, or even the EX Tenko, EX for Senha, if you see the angle, will be quite good. So let me demonstrate why standing jab is sometimes problematic. It is fast, so if you see it really late and your opponent has already hit a button in the air, you can be pretty sure that you're going to anti-air them. So as you can see, my standing jab isn't exactly free to do, right? And this is, again, I'm just demonstrating the speed of it. It can work. Here's my EX for Senha. It's good. Jump, medium punch, and you'll see the... what else we got? Crouching hard punch too as well. And this is against lowers, jumping short. And that's another important thing to keep in mind is the opponent's attack in the air. What kind of angle is it sitting at, and how fast is their jump in the first place? So we're going to use a different normal, and I can demonstrate how using crouching jab against this jumping fierce is not really in my favor. Also, I think the property, it's getting out prioritized as well. Not just the hitbox, but if they're hitting on the same frame, I think the jump normals will actually win as well. So that's another issue you have to be mindful of. So crouching hard punch, I can probably get it to do as well and trade. These are all very important things to know. If I do EX for Senha, it's no question. As long as I have the angle correctly, I'm able to anti-air. Now the jump back strong might be a little bit more difficult, but that's also there, but it's slower. So if you're doing an anti-air that is longer startup, then you have to be even more prepared and ready for it. That's how you can sort of prioritize which anti-airs you want to use. If they're fast, if they're invincible, and yeah, that's pretty much it. If they're fast or invincible, or like what is the risk reward involved with them? So like crouching hard punch is pretty good, but it's also slow, so my opponent might hit me and I might misjudge the angle, so I might want to use something that's invincible instead if I am uncertain. But one of the more important things about anti-airing is not the anti-airing itself, and this is why I talked about not just like choosing the angle, but just being aware of how it happens in the first place. This is one thing that's not discussed, not nearly enough. I mean, when I say it's not being discussed, what resources do you really have these days for fighting games, right? So, the anti-airing, really, it starts here. It starts in the mid-range, when you're on the ground, because that's the whole point of your opponent jumping at you, is because they want to bypass the zoning phase. They may not feel that you are, maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll feel you're ready for an anti-air, or maybe they found a good angle, but what they may have found, even more so, is that your ground normals are consuming too much time, so that when they're jumping, it's harder for you to anti-air. And in some cases, actually, quite a few cases, if they jump at the right time, they will punish your ground normals. So that's really what the aim is. And it's sort of haphazard the way it happens in this game. Sometimes people just do it, right? They're just in the air all of a sudden. Maybe there wasn't an intelligent reason behind it, but it's still something you have to deal with, and something you are responsible for responding to. So first you have to know those anti-airs first, but you have to know why your opponent is jumping at you in the first place. So I want to break down on the ground how this whole process works. So if you look at Karin's frame data, well, we're talking about her powerful mid-range normals, right? Her standing medium kick, her crouching medium kick, her standing roundhouse. We'll just look at those for now. We'll look at the numbers. So, this is not Karin, but Laura. If we look at Karin's frame data, if we look at that standing medium kick, that standing roundhouse, and that crouching medium kick, they're obviously good, and this is something you can study by themselves. But what I want to point out is the total active frames of the move, meaning the whole duration of them. And this is important because if you have a really long move that takes up a lot of time, such as standing roundhouse, and then your opponent jumps at you, you're still recovering from this, and it's going to be more difficult for you to anti-air. Now, this is just the data, right? This is just the math. You have to be mentally prepared for it as well. And if you have neither of these in mind, then it's going to be even more frustrating and difficult to anti-air your opponent properly. So if you're doing this jump, if you're doing this standing roundhouse, which is 34 total active frames, and Laura's jump total is around 45, depending on which normal she uses, it might change a little bit. 45 and 34 is a difference of 9 frames. So theoretically, if you do both things at the same time, you only have 9 frames to anti-air her. If she jumps at you, about 9 frames. If she jumps at you at the same time you hit standing roundhouse, 9 frames. It's the difference between the total active frames of this and her total jump. Now her jump is probably going to hit you earlier than 45 because the normal is going to be extended downward. So it's going to be more than the jump total. So less than 9 frames. And it's not going to happen when you're both, it's not going to happen at the same time. It's very unlikely. So it's either going to happen before or after you do the standing roundhouse. And if it happens after you do the standing roundhouse, then you might be able to recover in time. But if she jumps in the air and then you hit standing roundhouse, good luck anti-airing her. Because say she already jumps in the air for 10 frames. You have to block. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So for example, I'll give you a really, really, really rough example situation here. We're going to use that same jumping fierce. Oh, I guess I got to reprogram it, huh? Let me do that one more time. Now, if I hit standing roundhouse while I'm zoning her on the ground, and she jumps at me, that's probably going to punish. So again, you have to look at the angles. Now, I'm going to try to anti-her with standing jab after I hit roundhouse. That's not a good example. I can't anti-her. That actually punished me. So probably jumping short would be a better thing for Laura to use in this situation, but this is not the real way it's going to work. But just to give you a rough idea. But what I have to point out is how the mid-range interacts with the jump angle. So from right here, Laura doesn't want to use jumping fierce. We just saw that sometimes it doesn't really work out. But she's going to want to use jumping short. So just to give you another idea of how that would work, I'm going to go ahead and go to the recording for her jumping short. Now that is much better. If I'm zoning, this is also the same range where she wants to do that. If I'm zoning here, if I'm standing roundhouse, I can't anti-air her. But if I take this theory and then kind of work it more in my favor, if I'm now using normals that have less total active frames, then I increase the time I have to anti-air her, and I'm able to deal with her if she jumps. So if you look at the difference between my standing roundhouse, which is 34 total active frames, but I substitute that with a poke that has less total active frames, such as standing medium kick or crouching medium kick. These are both pretty good mid-range normals. Now let's use crouching medium kick because that has the least total active frames. If I'm zoning with crouching medium kick, I should, in theory, be able to anti-air much better. Or at least be able to block and see the situation, right? But again, the Laura jump angle, it doesn't really line up with this. That's another important thing. So now, I have a situation now. Now, I know that my crouching medium kick allows me enough time to at least breathe if she jumps at me at most times. I can respond to it, and I can multitask. I can deal with the ground. But I'm also taking away from the reward of standing roundhouse. So, the takeaway point is that the ground normals affect your ability to anti-air, but it also influences the way that your opponent may or may not jump at you. So if you're doing a laggier normal, it's harder for them to get closer to you by using a jump. But you also have to consider the startup of your anti-airs and the angles themselves. So it's not always a question of just reacting to their jump, but it's also reacting to the situation and knowing what normals that you have to deal with all things that are possible. So I think, what else do we have? Do I have anything else I want to cover? That's it. Whiffing attacks. Oh yeah. And another thing that you can do, it's still related to help with anti-airing your opponent. A better character would be someone like Ryu, Ken, someone who has a Dragon Punch motion, because you can eliminate some of the execution frames. Now, if you are starting up a move, that's just the startup of it itself, but it takes you time to actually do the move. So it's like increasing the startup, as we talked about earlier, for something like Extra Senha. So if I see somebody jump at me, and then I do the whole thing all at once, it's still taking me more time than the startup. But if I eliminate some of that execution, if I at least eliminate the inputs, then I can be prepared for it. So just to give you the last thing, if my opponent is jumping at me with that same jumping fierce, and I'm zoning with that low forward, maybe she's trying to dash at me. I'm covering both things. I'm really paying attention to the air. That's really my goal here. And I'm using the EX because it's invincible. So as long as if I recover in time, I should be able to anti-air. But my focus is actually not on the ground. That was much too slow. And while I'm doing this low forward, I'm also doing the input for EX for Senha. So I'm only paying attention to the air. And when I see her in the air, when she does jump at me, that's when I do EX for Senha. So this is one of the basic concepts that you can do to sort of decrease the time it takes you to anti-air. It's not going to change the start of the move itself, but it's going to aid your mental preparedness. And it's also a good habit just because it'll keep you aware of what could happen in the air. That rhymed. Bars. Well, that's it for today. I hope you learned something. Twitch.tv/Automatic. Twitter.com/Automatic. I'm Automatic. Hope you learned something. How do I close videos out? I forgot.